polar bear is one of the few living things that can survive the bitter cold and permanent darkness of a polar winter. Yet it's not the first predator to adapt to life in the Arctic. In Alaska, an incredible new discovery is proving what no one thought possible. 70 million years ago, dinosaurs ruled the frozen north. In the Arctic, for 10 months of the year, cold reigns supreme. For 3 of those months, the sun disappears entirely below the horizon. Temperatures can plunge to minus 50 degrees. Was this frozen wasteland home to the dinosaurs? One man is risking life and limb to prove it. Roland Gangloff of the University of Alaska Fairbanks has traveled hundreds of miles north of the Arctic Circle to the oil terminal at Deadhorse. The last human settlement between here and the North Pole, Deadhorse marks the end of the Trans-Alaska Highway. But it's not the end of Gangloff's journey. A 200-mile flight over frozen tundra, known as Alaska's Arctic Slope, will take him to where few have gone before. Gangloff's in a race against time. Alaska is a land of extremes. Here, for only 8 weeks of the year, temperatures reach above freezing, and the ice melts, turning the top few inches of tundra into a lush carpet of green, and a breeding ground for millions of hungry mosquitoes that will soon hatch and begin their search for blood they can feed on.
We're 9 o'clock.
Gangloff's final destination is a 10-mile stretch of the Colville River. A bleak strip of sand in the middle of the river, aptly named Poverty Bar, will be home for the next 5 weeks. But comforts are few. 2 days away by boat is the frigid Arctic Ocean, and the weather can still turn foul. In Alaska, the summer sun never sets. Because the digging season is short, Gangloff and his team will put in 14-hour days to hunt for dinosaurs.
Yeah, but if you look at the premaxillary teeth, many times.
At any moment, freezing winds and early snows could force them off Poverty Bar. Even now, thick layers of clothing and hot food are a necessity to fend off the chill. 30 years ago, the possibility that dinosaurs could survive the harsh brutality of the Arctic was inconceivable. Most had been found in what were once lush tropical climates. But in 1961, Robert Liscombe, a geologist prospecting for oil, stumbled upon these bones, but didn't recognize them. 2 decades later, word finally spread that for the first time, dinosaurs had been discovered above the Arctic Circle. In 1987, Gangloff followed Liscombe's trail to a bend in the Colville River called Ocean Point. Here, in these bluffs, layers of sediment have been exposed dating back to the Mesozoic era, the age of the dinosaurs. Then, this was a great river delta fed by melting snows from nearby mountains. By the Cretaceous, 75 million years ago, tons of mud and sand had been washed into the delta. Eventually, the sediment turned to stone, and with it, the first fragmentary evidence that dinosaurs had lived here. Imagine the sky is clear except for the flare of the northern lights. The temperature drops to the 20s. A thirsty predator stops on the frozen bank of the river to drink. It uses its horny beak to break the ice. Hard to believe? Roland hopes to find its bones, but the job won't be easy. In Alaska, the ground is frozen and filled with chunks of ice called lenses.
Diamonds! We're rich!
Clinging to the face of the bluff, the team tediously picks away at the rock to locate the layers that might contain fossils. But with little luck.
See this shiny layer there? That's where we're going now.
Unfortunately, the previous winter had been unusually mild. Excessive meltwater had eroded the surface, sending tons of earth cascading down the cliff. The only option now is to start at the top. After 2 days of hard labor, the team finally uncovers the layer they were looking for. They had battled cold, rain, and the incessant mosquitoes for a payoff that looks like a few unspectacular scraps. Some arm bones, and the fragments of a backbone.
We're looking at a typical exposure of the Liscum bone bed. We have an ice lens that runs along the back of the quarry here. We have another ice lens in the front that's just melted. And they're not only cutting through the bones, as you have many times, but here you can actually see that the rib has been broken apart and then moved apart as well.
It took Roland's trained eye to recognize what creature these bones belonged to. It turned out to be a duck-billed hadrosaur called Edmontosaurus. The duck-bills were the most abundant dinosaurs in North America. Though larger than elephants, these two-legged plant-eaters were slow and docile. To protect themselves from predators, they roamed the continent in vast herds, grazing on the lush tropical forests of the Cretaceous. Their discovery raised a provocative question. What was an animal with a keen sense of survival doing in a place like Alaska? Day by day, piece by piece, the Colville Bluffs are surrendering tiny glimpses of a surprising new chapter in the history of dinosaurs. Emerging from the rocks are towering monsters like Albertosaurus and horned dinosaurs like Triceratops. Predators dominated the prehistoric world, but the plant eaters were far more numerous. Though duckbills were the most common, their variety was staggering. Some sported weird arrays of headgear. The Lambeosaurus had a tall, hollow crest with a spike pointing backwards. But the biggest show-off was Parasaurolophus. Its crowning glory was the most spectacular skull crest of all the duckbills, a great arch of bone that swept back over its head. Why is a mystery, but Parasaurolophus may have been a one-man band of hoots and bellows. Another remarkable feature of duckbills was their teeth. Edmontosaurus came equipped with spares.
These rows that you see here were actually where the teeth were inserted, and these teeth are like batteries or conveyor belts of teeth that come up, and as they're worn off, they replace each other. And an individual Edmontosaurus can have 800 to 1,000 teeth in its lifetime.
Plants and trees are vital to understanding the climate 70 million years ago. These are leaves. During an ancient autumn, they fell from a tree, then turned to stone. Their presence indicates that Alaska would have been warmer than it is today. In winter, average daytime temperatures reached the 50s, at night rarely below zero, yet freezing rain and snow were common. Ironically, Alaska was closer to the North Pole, but 70 million years ago, there were no polar ice caps. Still, the sun would disappear below the horizon for 6 months of the year, and the bleakness of winter descended on the dinosaurs. With little or no food, it's a wonder they survived.
If you were a duckbill living here 70 to 72 million years ago, you would experience 6 months of very low light to no light at all. And the plants would be experiencing the same thing. So we see the plants losing their leaves, becoming deciduous or casting off their leaves and going into a state of dormancy for half the year.
With no food available for half the year, life would be tenuous, unless the duckbills adopted a modern strategy for survival. Reptiles like alligators burrow into riverbanks and hibernate when food and water is scarce. Some scientists think dinosaurs slept through the winter, using snow for insulation. But until someone digs up a hibernating dinosaur, it's only speculation. The most logical theory is what thousands of animals do every year. Solitary caribou come together in herds to migrate. In August, having reared their young, they head south to where winter is milder. On the way, they graze constantly to give them the energy for the trek. If herds of migrating dinosaurs thundered across the Arctic tundra 70 million years ago, the proof may lie buried in a gully 2,000 miles away. At Canada's Dinosaur Provincial Park in Alberta, bones by the ton lie partially exposed, most belonging to hadrosaurs like those found in Alaska. But here, their bones are not always scattered and broken. Whole skeletons have been found intact. Phil Curry of the Tyrrell Museum is no stranger to duckbills. Over the past 20 years, he and his team have excavated thousands. This one is lying with its tail unfurled exactly where it died. Having exposed the beautifully preserved tail, Curry's team set about recovering the rest of the dinosaur. Finding its skull might reveal an unusual feature. Though Edmontosaurus had no showy crest, a balloon on its nose could be inflated to produce sounds and flashes of color.
We think that duck-billed dinosaurs were not only visual animals, but they also seem to have been animals that produced a lot of sounds that they could pick up on and identify each other with as well. Now, in the case of animals like Edmontosaurus, it may have been something that was amplified through the nasal balloons, if you want to say that.
Curry is convinced he and Roland Gangloff have found the start and finish of a great migration. In Alaska, small groups joined others until a vast herd, guided by instinct, began the long journey south to Alberta.
Dinosaurs like the duck-billed dinosaurs and the ceratopsian dinosaurs are animals that could move very efficiently. They have long limbs. We can look at trackway sites and calculate how fast they're moving, and we can see that it wouldn't be much of a problem for either the duck-bills or the ceratopsian dinosaurs to move great distances over a period of several months. And we can see that they probably were moving south to areas like Alberta to take advantage of the food that was available there during the winter months. And of course they were being followed by the Tyrannosaurs, which would pick off the older stragglers and so on from these big herds.
The distance from the north coast of Alaska to southern Canada is 2,000 miles, farther than any land animal, including caribou, migrates today.
Must have been absolutely fantastic to have an aerial view of the Cretaceous period, either in the springtime in Alberta or the fall months in Alaska, because what you would see is very much like we see today with the caribou. The animals would start collecting into small groups, and as the small groups started their migration, they would start amalgamating and form bigger groups. And these bigger groups, going through the forests and across the rivers and so on, would have been an absolutely fantastic thing when you're talking 4-ton dinosaurs and thousands of them.
Phil Curry's evidence seemed solid until tragic details began to emerge. Details of a day in Alaska when a journey in the distant past went terribly wrong. Until Roland Gangloff began digging here, the vast wilderness of Alaska seemed no place for a dinosaur. But his latest discovery suggests dinosaurs were doing more in Alaska than just idling away their summers. He and his team have found bones which are unusually small in size, but large in implications.
I have in my hand a cast of a Edmontosaurus skull, which is still a juvenile, is not a full-grown adult. But when you compare it to the jaws and skulls that we have here in Alaska, you can note very clearly that ours are very small by comparison and much younger juveniles.
Over 80% of Gangloff's fossils are so small, they can only be from duckbills no more than 2 years old, too young to walk all the way to Canada.
The young could not travel anywhere near as fast as the adults. And if you're asking for over 2,000 miles each way, and a total of over 5,000 to almost 6,000 miles of just linear distance, just straight line distance, when you consider how animals migrate and how many more miles they would put on just meandering around and all the feeding stops and everything that goes on in a typical migration, it's really demanding much too much energy and much too much expense, as we would say, the biologic expense when it comes to migration.
Roland believes the youngsters lived in Alaska year-round, making short forays from the coast to the mountains in search of food. But even short migrations can be perilous. Emerging from the fossils of the Colville is evidence of a disaster. On a spring morning 70 million years ago, the sun appeared above the horizon and the snow began to melt. On cue, a herd of duckbills set out for the mountains across the river. But then, as now, rivers swollen by melting snow can erupt into torrents of raging water. The young dinosaurs lost their footing. Thrashing against the strong current, they panicked. The adults looked on helplessly as their offspring were swept away. The drama may have lasted only a few moments, but the scene was devastating. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, perished. These caribou were also crossing a river when a flash flood took them by surprise. Eventually, their bloated corpses will decompose and vanish into the sediment like the duckbills. In Alaska, the ice bears mute testimony to the unending cycle of life and death. Without it, the tragic story of the polar dinosaurs may have never been told. But does it prove they were permanent residents? Roland Gangloff makes a compelling argument.
Some populations remained at high latitude in Alaska and parts of northern Canada, and these then took up residency at times, and other times had to migrate to some degree to make up for the changes in seasons. And I think that most of the migration was lateral, from the interior, going to the interior in the summer, moved back to the coastlines in the winter. Sometimes might have moved down the coastline, but not great distances. Maybe a few tens of miles at times, and maybe at the most 100 miles or so.
The polar dinosaurs are now on the map, but Alaska may not be the end of the road. One paleontologist thinks it was not just the home of the duckbills, but the birthplace of the most famous dinosaurs in North America. Jim Kirkland has seen them all in the rugged hills of Colorado and Utah. From the Jurassic period 150 million years ago, Stegosaurus and its brutal enemy, the carnosaur Allosaurus. As well as the huge earth-shaking sauropods. Yet 100 million years ago, these creatures suddenly disappear from the fossil record. To find out why, Jim has come to Alberta to excavate their successors.
We don't see a mass extinction, we see a complete replacement of the fauna. And this is its legacy, the classic Upper Cretaceous faunas of Dinosaur Provincial Park. And this got to me asking why. Why, in a very short period of time, do we totally turn over the fauna? In this investigation, we have to examine different areas in the world. Where are these animals coming from?
Kirkland thinks the dinosaurs in Alberta first evolved in Asia. Their invasion began after shifting continents pushed Alaska up out of a primeval ocean, creating a gateway to North America.
During the early Cretaceous, there was no Alaska. It was formed by two processes. One of these was the rotation of a land area on western Canada's coastline down to the south. At the same time, a land area about as large as New Guinea, called Rangralia, was drifting north across the North Pacific. The collision of these two land areas led to the development of a large mountain range that went continuously across into Siberia. This is the Brooks Range, and it provided a land bridge for the migration of dinosaurs from Asia into western North America. We see the hadrosaurs coming in large numbers, and we see the tyrannosaurs. This allowed these animals to come in through Alberta, into Utah, across western North America, all the way to the east coast. With the migration of these animals, we see the loss of our sauropods in western North America. They're gone. And we see the huge carnosaurs missing, replaced by tyrannosaurs. This led the stage for the development of the faunas we see today here in Alberta.
Alaska was the staging area for the greatest parade of dinosaurs the world has ever seen. After a decade of painstaking work on the frigid, bug-infested Colville, Roland Gangloff has clearly only scratched the surface. But his discoveries have already proven how little we know about the fantastic creatures that ruled the Earth eons ago. We can only guess what still lies buried beneath the ice.